you so much for joining us today. This is a very, very special occasion for us at AASA every year when we have the pleasure and the honor of introducing you to four of our very, very best educational leaders in the country. And I want to thank AIG and First Student. These are the two companies that make this entire process possible. So thank you both so much for your contributions to allow to make this happen. As is usually the case when we do this at the press club, we are going to have a member of the media that will be moderating the panel. And we are again very fortunate to have Stephen Sawchuk, who's an associate editor with Ed Week, doing that for us this year again. Thank you very much, Stephen, for coming back. And of course, our four finalists. We have Bryan Johnson, who's the superintendent of the Hamilton County Schools in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We have Khalid Mumin, who is the superintendent of schools in Reading, Pennsylvania. We have Christy Perry, who is the superintendent in the Salem-Keizer Public Schools in Oregon. And we have Michelle Reid, superintendent of the Northshore School District in the state of Washington. Welcome to the four of you. Thank you so much for being the wonderful leaders that you are. And Stephen, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I actually managed to remember to unmute myself. This has been like a real hard thing for me over the past 9 months or however long we've been in this. So thank you again for having me. For my sins, I am back to ask some questions of our finalists this year. It's really an honor to be here. These really are some of the most exceptional superintendents in the country, and we have so much to learn from them. So let me tell you just a little bit about our format. I'm going to do moderator's choice questions for maybe 20 minutes or so, and then we'll turn it over to you. I believe if you would like to ask a question, we're going to have you put it in the chat function. And then I'll go through that and ask questions. And I'll remind you of this later, we want other news organizations and other educators to have first crack at questions. So just keep that in mind when we turn it over to audience Q&A. So, all right, my four superintendents, are you guys ready? Let me all see thumbs up so I know. Okay. 2 thumbs up, Bryan. Come on, 2 thumbs up. Ah, there we go. All right. All right. So I don't think we can really start this discussion without addressing the monumental historical events of this past week. What we are hearing, at least as reporters, is that students are frightened, angry, confused. Teachers are really struggling, I think, to field questions about this. Find the right resources. I mean, there is really nothing out there that a soup to nuts curriculum on how to kind of address this. And I think also, right, we forget that local school boards, it's the smallest sort of sector of democracy in our country. You guys are really at the forefront of helping your communities, I think, make sense of this. So I would like each of you to tell me a little bit about how you have been responding and addressing this with your board, with your community, on your social media outlets, or however you're best communicating these days. And I'd like all four of you to go. And Michelle, I think I will ask you to begin. Lucky you. And then we'll go Michelle, Khalid, Bryan, and then Christy.
Thank you, Stephen. It certainly has been a historic week of events for our country, and a bit of a harrowing experience. I know that I didn't get to watch a great deal of the events live, but that which I saw honestly were shocking. And I think more than shocking, disturbing. When I shared those comments with our leadership team, some of our leadership team actually were offended that I found the events shocking. There are some of my leadership team, particularly our leaders of color, who felt like in some ways what happened in Washington, D.C. at our Capitol has been happening in many quarters and was illuminated for the entire country to see, which I think at that point requires and warrants a response. And as the four of us and Dan and you, Stephen, and others watching, It's a time for leaders to speak up and to talk about what happened. It's a time when relationships matter. It's a time that as we work to nurture a more perfect union, that we have to examine what happened, call it what it was, and talk with students in ways, I think, that reinforce that they're safe in our schools and in our community. We have a number of students and families and staff that are concerned if that behavior can happen in our nation's capital, in, if you will, hallowed historical halls, then it could happen anywhere. And that's a frightening thought. So I think reassuring our community, our students, our families and staff that they're safe has been really an important feature of our work. Finally, I would say that it's not simply talking to people, although I did issue a statement, as many of us have. It's listening to people. It's a time for us to hear the anguish, the frustration, and to think about the readiness to make serious change. And as we dismantle systemic barriers to race and educational equity within our purview, it's going to take every ounce of energy we have. And as Brene Brown says, we can choose courage or we can choose comfort, but we cannot choose both. And this is a time we need to exercise courage. Thank you, Stephen, for giving me the opportunity to comment.
Thank you so much, and Stephen, for that question. And I believe that the incidents that transpired, it's an opportunity for us as leaders to continually step out there and lead. You know, I have a saying that, and I'm a strong believer that leaders cannot lead where they're afraid to go. And leaders cannot lead where they're afraid to go. And also leaders cannot perceive what they don't know. We're looking at incidents that transpired at our nation's capital, whereas it's a true teachable moment for our children. I've been very fortunate to lead a large equity platform in our school system, which we already have in place, and being in a proactive stance of having a resolution regarding equity and anti-racism, which is very fluid, and we're able to adapt that resolution and policy to map onto the needs of our kids. Therefore, having that framework, it's important to establish the communication, especially with the leaders in the district, to be able to get the messaging into the teachers, to be able to empower students to engage in discussions around what transpired. We know that young people are extremely active in voicing their opinions. And I'm in a situation where I'm able to lead and empower students to do that protesting. They're speaking out with dignity and with focus. What we saw the other day was not a situation of true protest. Our students have questions about it. So first and foremost, by engaging the administrative team, my central office team, my building principals around what transpired, and taking a snapshot, and capturing how they are feeling about the situation and how we can best cultivate this into a learning experience of what not to do when you're empowered to protest. Secondly, one of the big reasons around the equity and anti-racism resolution, which speaks very clearly to what we do in our district, we have to continue to cultivate the safety of our students. And many of our students, especially in the Reading School District, we're 99% underserved, 88% Latino, and we have students who are afraid because what they saw was a glimpse of what people may or how they feel about them, and they're afraid. So we have to create those safe spaces to be able to increase and encourage that dialogue so that we can get to actionable steps, whereas students continue to stay on the pathway of doing things and pushing out responses around advocacy in a positive nature. I think it's what transpired was an eye opener as well as a black eye for the United States of America. There's a lot of work to be done. And what better place to be able to move past situations and to discourage future situations like those is to make sure that we have a prepared and confident cadre of young people across the United States to be able to do it the right way and exercise their voices for change.
Yeah, I would just echo the comments that Michelle and Khalid have made around really how disturbing the events of this week have been from a personal and professional context. And I'm always sensitive to when I am personally impacted that other leaders and that teachers and those that work alongside me and obviously the students and families that we serve are likely in a very similar place. And so, the only thing I would add is that, for us, our major pivot was to make sure that our leaders were equipped with what resources we had to provide, which I think, as mentioned earlier, maybe within the question, Stephen, a very limited pool of resources, but what resources we could pull together to get into the hands of leaders, to hopefully get in the hands of teachers, to make sure that they were prepared to support students in the moment. And so we're very fortunate. We've made a lot of investment in not just equity, but in regards to equity or connected to equity, the social and emotional well-being of our students and counselors and such. And so through our lead counselor, our counseling department, really working overnight to pull together resources to get into the hands of our leaders that very next day through our community superintendents was really of the utmost importance to us. But we are in a moment in public education, I think, again, as Michelle and Khalid have mentioned, and I think it's important for us as leaders to lean into this moment to make sure that our students really learn what civility is, how that this was wrong, but that we are America and we are better than this, and what steps they can take.
Right, I'll just, I think my colleagues have summed it up so well. I want to focus on one group of students we haven't mentioned, and it came to my attention that we do have extra fear in our refugee students who have come from violent countries with lots of political unrest. And for us, we have a large refugee population, but that was something I hadn't really thought about in the first 12 hours. And so I just want to call that out to anyone that's listening, is that's a group that we need to pay especially a lot of attention to, because this is a re-traumatizing event. I've moved from a place that I came to, Oregon, in a lawnmower bag because of political unrest, and look what's happening in my new country. So just want to bring that forward. And then for us, we did all the same things. And I think it's a reminder that all that we did before this moment was as important as continuing to do what we did in this moment, because each of us have had that commitment to equity, anti-racism. For us, it's building the knowledge, will, and skill of our leaders to interrupt systems of oppression. And in this moment, we've had all kinds of conversations that led up to it. And I think that while we also have such extreme views of the events, and I think it's our job right now to protect our educators who are trying to have the really right questions and conversations in their classrooms, but then also getting attacked by by community members who did not see that as a threat to democracy. I clearly said to my entire staff yesterday that what do we do in this moment as when we experience a threat to democracy, and how do we talk about it? And how can we be sure that we accurately tell the story
as the days unfold and we find out all the facts related to the story, or not the story, but the events. So I just stand with my colleagues and say it's time for us as leaders to be brave, be courageous. Our kids are counting on us.
So clearly, I think the thing that has shaped all of the work that you do and all of the context in which students are learning this past year has been the pandemic. And I know all of you, at least some point or other, have been in a remote only setting. I know some of you have come back in to small degrees. Bryan, I think you mentioned that your students had been back in person for about, I think you said 84 days out of the school year. So, I think it's very easy for us to focus on all the awful, implications that this had for school systems. But something that Christy said yesterday when we were all meeting just to get acquainted, stuck in my head. And Christy, you said, we should not come out of this looking the same as we went in. And, what you were really, I think, getting at is we need to take the things that we've learned and the things that actually did work really well and make those things permanent. So I'd like to ask each of you, and we'll go in reverse order this time, starting with Christy. I'd like to ask each of you, what were some of those things? What were some of those breakthroughs? How will you continue them in the future?
All right, so I think for me, because I have a list of about 10, but I think the one I'll highlight is how we've connected with parents and families. I told my entire district, I think it's the best culturally responsive leadership training we have done in Salem-Keizer, because in the first weeks of the pandemic, we laid out week by week what our goals were for the week. So week one was care and connection, and you will make a phone call or a virtual meeting to every student in your classroom. And we extended that over the weeks around that care and connection. And as we went from asking everyone to come to us and us showing up for them, we learned all kinds of things about their families. We learned that we helped moms and dads log in. We had IEP meetings with the whole family in the living room. One student was taken off of an individual education plan with her family in the living room, celebrating. I mean, who has ever gotten that before? So I think it's that how we connect and how we show up and our ability to go to people. I wonder, do parent-teacher conferences ever look the same? Or can mom and dad Zoom in both from their work site if they need to, or from their living room with 5 siblings sitting around celebrating the successes? So we said, don't talk about grades, ask how they're doing. And I think we've really, I think that's been a huge shift for us. So I hope that endures. It will.
So I think the pandemic really made even clearer some of the challenges that have existed underlying, or that we have many times skimmed over, so to speak, that just have been there. The one I would lean into that we know will remain in our community is the digital divide. COVID-19 really made the digital divide very pronounced. It made it abundantly clear, and we're a unique, school system. We're urban, suburban, and rural. About 45,000 students. So we have pockets where, we have direct broadband access, and we have pockets where they do not get it. And so we knew that was a real challenge. We also have a very collaborative community. We're fortunate here to have some business and industry and philanthropic organizations that believe and understand in the importance of public education. And we were able to stand up pretty quickly a group of folks, business and industry, philanthropy, our county government and city government, as well as obviously under the direction of our school board, a plan that doesn't just address the digital divide in this COVID moment, but addresses it for the next decade. So every economically disadvantaged student in Hamilton County, 28,500 students, will have access to broadband internet for the next 10 years. And that is significant in that this moment in time offered and extended to us an opportunity to really elevate this conversation, to really make sure that people understood what the challenges were. And, you know, the transformational power in that is that we will be able to continue learning, and the learnings that have been taken in this moment from teachers. I joked with somebody earlier that, you know, school systems, districts, teachers, leaders, everybody was pushed into the deep end of integrating technology. And now to think that because of access to broadband, because of that access our students will have, we'll be able to leverage those skills that have been learned in this moment for years to come. And so that would be the thing that I would hang our hat on. One of the many things that I would hang our hat on. That's something that we believe will be transformational beyond COVID-19.
First and foremost, the pandemic allowed for us to have the opportunity to really test our valor in regards to our community engagement, student engagement, and also stakeholder engagement, and how do we consistently meet the needs of our children. What we found very quickly is that, again, similar to what Bryan has said, what the pandemic has done, it really forced us as an administration, as an administration, as a school system, to move very quickly. For example, our 5-year technology plan, which was well thought out with copious detail in regards to funding and the rollout, we had to do it in 3 months. With the school district that 99% of the students are underserved, we knew that there was a huge digital divide within our community. Therefore, we did some assessments in regards to who needed technology. We already knew how many devices we needed. And once the students had received the devices in hand, the connectivity issues were something that were paramount. That afforded us the opportunity to work with our business partners, our community partners, and also our internet providers to be able to provide access for these devices and for our children. At this point, we have directed funding that we've received, the green light from our internet provider that they can put connections in these homes. And I can say with confidence that all of our students have access to technology devices as well as connectivity. That is something that, looking at the pandemic, that's something that is sustainable, which we will be able to use to further support the instruction that is delivered in our schools, which is very exciting. More exciting, and something that will live on and continue to grow, is the idea around hope. And when I'm talking about hope, I'm talking about hope, open advocacy, passionate action, and empathy. It's not simply a school district thing. It's a stakeholder thing. And that encompasses students, parents, teachers, staff, administrators, higher institutions of learning, our business partners, and legislators have gotten on board and believing in hope. That is something that is sustainable. Again, it's hope, open action, passionate, open action, passionate action, and empathy. Those are things that will live on. And keeping that acronym in mind as we continue to move forward, working towards the normal, the new normal, I believe we found some magnificent gifts that we're able to offer distance learning on the drop of a dime. We're able to offer distance learning to supplement strong teaching and pedagogy in the classroom. And something that was very eye-opening for me, being able to take students and have them in small groups, or breakout groups, as we would say on Zoom, to be able to offer those social services and emotional services and supports in a virtual environment. I believe the gift is this is a good teacher and a good time for us to be able to continually look at how we enhance our delivery of programming, teaching, and instruction.
I think my three colleagues are pretty inspiring. I want to riff off of what Bryan said a little bit in terms of needing to learn things really quickly. It felt a little like we took our swim lessons that were planned for 3 months and had about 3 hours and then got thrown in with just our water wings. And sometimes we didn't have time to blow up the air in our water wings. So it was a pretty nimble move for a profession and a body of work that doesn't often get characterized as nimble, that's for sure. So I do want to share that I agree with Khalid that the inequities that have been historic in education didn't begin with the pandemic. Rather, I think they were illuminated by the pandemic, and that harsh light has given us a moment I think we really need to contemplate pivoting off of in a serious way. I think learning happens best in community, and what we've learned is how important community is. Relationships matter, trust matters, our connections with our teachers, our bus drivers, our food service folks, our office professionals, our community, our students, our custodians and maintenance, everybody had to pull together, and many of us had to learn new work very quickly, and perhaps doing old work in new ways to maintain our health and safety. I think that the actual experience of teaching and learning, with all of us being placed sort of in these new learner roles, I know we had many teachers who had been teaching 20, 25 years who felt like first-year teachers as we learn new tools and new ways of connecting. I will say that we're very optimistic. We're grateful for all that we've learned and hopeful for all that we have moving forward. And we've had an opportunity to redefine learning spaces, which I think will do us well as we move into the future. We've redefined the time and day. We've found it imperative to provide both synchronous, real-time, and asynchronous your time instructional possibilities for students who are working or caring for family members or had other hardships. We've had to flex how we do things in ways we've never had to before, and evaluate its success in real time and monitor and adjust in real time, which I think is something we always aspire to, but it's been rather necessary at this point in time too. Like Christy said, I think we've gotten to know many of our families better than we ever knew them before. And we've really continued to challenge ourselves to make, even though we're a large system, to make ourselves feel small and operate small and take small units to work directly with families and children and staff. It's our goal and our belief that it's imperative that as a nation, we reopen the schools of the future and not reopen the schools of the past.
So continuing on this theme, one of the things that came up last year when I did this presentation was people talked a lot about student voice. And I think this is something that we all say we value, and the reality is often quite a bit different. But I know that student voice is, an issue that a lot of you are passionate about, Khalid especially. And so what I'd like to ask, and again, I think this is something that we'd benefit from hearing from all four of you on, what are you doing now to get feedback from your students about their experiences, to hear about what they're particularly struggling with, whether it's the remote platform you're using, the lack of in-person connection with teachers. How are you responding to what it is that students say they need? How are you continuing to give them leadership opportunities when, being class president or whatever, it looks really different right now for students? We'll start this time with Khalid, because I know this is something he's very passionate about. And then I guess we'll go to Bryan, Michelle, and Christy.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. First and foremost, having student engagement is important, extremely important, because it empowers the students to be an active member or active participant of the education that they're receiving. We're very overt with opening opening the doors for student communication, a lot of survey data, receiving feedback from children and then taking that data to inform practice. Secondly, having students organize in forums where they're able to communicate with high-ranking personnel in the school district. For example, I am the leader of a leadership squad, and those students at the secondary level, I meet with them, they express their concerns. I definitely always have questions for them because I'm trying to understand where they're coming from, and I'm able to provide them some insight on policy and how some of the policies have changed because of their input, or some of the nuances in policy that they may not understand. One of the most prominent examples of this type of engagement, it's about voice and choice. And a few years ago with the Stoneman Douglas massacre, the youth organized and they wanted to speak out against gun violence. And the youth organized nationally which led to a campaign of 14 minutes of walkout and protest for gun violence. And this was a national phenomenon. I remember sitting in a meeting with a colleague, and the leaders were grappling over how are we going to deal with this. Some leaders were talking about disciplinary consequences for students who leave class and things of this nature. And the arrow was pointed to me. He said, you're the largest district in our county. What are you going to do with your kids? I said, quite simply, we're going to organize the student leadership groups. They're going to engage in discussions with their teachers and administrators. They're going to compose a plan. They're going to walk out for 14 minutes, and then they will have control of the school day, and we will follow their battery of activities in regards to stopping gun violence. And they were passionate about it. And I ended by saying the importance of student engagement is this. As the leader of a school system where 99% of the students are underserved and they are choosing to exercise voice, who am I to put a lid on that and stop it? When these young people will be fighting for a seat at the table for the rest of their lives to be heard. Why not in schools have that as the environment, the safe place for our students to groom those skills and strategies? Because those students are going to be our change agents of the future. So it's about listening, it's about empathy, it's about voice and choice, and it's about action from the plans that the young people put in place.
Thank you. Steve, I don't know there's a ton to add to that. I agree wholeheartedly with voice and choice. I give 3 or 4 kind of specific things that we do. Like Khalid, the surveys are really important to us. We survey our children and use that data for budget construction. So one of the things that transpired is we knew that student behavior and supports for the whole child were really important, and we were able to leverage data and even in our budget presentation from students directly, and making that a part of what we share with the county commission and what we share with our school board. I have a monthly superintendent student advisory group that meets with us, that meets with me directly, secondary school students from every school across our district. And much like Khalid, the things that they share, they are very transparent in what they share, very comfortable with telling us where there are issues, and we embrace that, and I question and probe to try to find thematic areas in ways in which we might address things like a system. And then our school board has done a great job of embracing student voice. So there is actually a student that sits on our school board. A student board member that sits on the board. And I remember last year we were having a conversation and they actually turned on the board floor to the student school board member and asked his opinion on how we should approach addressing it with students. And so the board's empowering those students is really important. And then the last thing I'll say and how this plays out, I remember vividly last year, a group of students coming, wanting to make an adjustment to a suicide prevention policy. And they had done a phenomenal amount of work around the specific language that they wanted, et cetera. And our board put into action really quickly those recommendations that they made, and we took those, and 80% of them were spot on and made those adjustments to policy. That's actually school board policy, right? So, student voice is critical. Students are so in tune with what's transpiring, and we always want that at the table.
I had to jot down some notes. You guys have some great ideas. So thanks both Khalid and Bryan. I love these events that I can learn a great deal from. In terms of student voice, that's really a foundation and a core for me as well as a leader. And I am each year in every school and every classroom in our district, which is over 1,100 classrooms. It's important for me to see students in their natural habitat. And at each school, I also spend time, we called it Breakfast Club. It's Brunch Club this year because of virtual, but we gather students that are chosen randomly that I break bread with and just hear their experience. What's going well? What could we improve? What are their thoughts? What advice do they have for me? If things could be the perfect situation, what would that look like? So it gives me an opportunity to meet with students from every grade level across our entire system. And I learned some really interesting things as a result of that. And I do send a note back to each student and try to stay in contact. And many of them have actually joined me for live community conversations throughout this pandemic, because I think it's important for our students to be seen and heard. That really demonstrates to them that we value their input. And but for them, we wouldn't be here, right? We're only superintendents because we're choosing to educate children. So we too have a student board, and the student board I meet with regularly, and they represent all our high schools specifically. This student board also coordinates a student summit at the end of the year where they invite over 100 students, and they design it with critical questions important to our students. And then we actionalize that work. I also try during the pandemic, because it's so challenging for communication, I've been sending notes to all student accounts. So I'll differentiate all elementary students and secondary students. In my most recent note, thank them for how hard they're working and just how grateful we are for their model of not giving up even when it's tough, and how motivating that is. And I have a number of students actually respond to me, and then I try to get back to them as well. So I love that interaction at both the personal level, sort of the classroom level, and then the macro level, if you will. I think it's important. And some key things we've learned, and I've learned actually in the last couple of weeks from our seniors especially, is their anxiety over GPA this year in a much greater way than ever before because of the lack of, in some cases, an ACT or SAT score. So many of the colleges and universities are requiring mid-year grade reports to be turned in. And I think listening to our students, our staff has really worked hard to make some adjustments and provide supports for our seniors. So that was a key information piece. And we've had other students take on the issue of mental health, as Bryan mentioned, and really work hard to create newsletters and forums for their fellow peers. And I think that really promotes a healthy, mentally healthy culture and climate. And finally, I will say we also do an annual study session with our student board and our elected adult board. And that's live streamed, and it happens in our board building. And I think that coming from those meetings, again, are opportunities for student ideas to inform policy that affect the much larger community in our house. Thank you. It's a great question, Stephen, and a real focus.
All right, so I just have to say I feel so honored to be sitting side by side with colleagues that have the same passion I have around student voice. And so we have many of the same things with little different names, but I want to highlight just a couple things. One is I was remiss in that I did not invite my student press today. Didn't think about it, but to Lynette, Eddie, Alec, Julian, and Dean, who are in our communications office, what a great opportunity for student journalists to learn about district business and be communicators with our students. We had a threat that happened one night in the middle of the night, and our 2 student journalists almost had it solved by the time I woke up. So now we have 24-hour journalism because kids are up at night when we're sleeping. But the other thing is, you know, our kids are so skilled, and they're skilled in civic discourse in ways that many adults aren't. And so one of the things I did this year is had a student-led task force on school resource officers. The thing that no one else could talk about publicly very well, our students went into a room and talked about for 3 months to come out with a series of recommendations. And when we put kids in the hands of decision-making, yes, we need their input, but there's really places they can help us with decision-making as well. And now their report and their recommendations will go on to a community-wide safety and well-being summit. So I'm really proud of them with that. And then I think with our equity teams, we have student equity teams and advisory teams. I'm starting to see that trickle into the fabric and the culture, especially of our high schools. And I think that's where we know that our passion is being now shared by our leaders. I got to sit in the South Salem High School Thespian Club, and one of their subcommittees was an anti-racist subcommittee. And I was like, all right, it was awesome. But they could talk about race and gender and issues related to that in ways that I had not seen adults. And they were talking about how they were going to spend their money at Black-owned bookstores in town and Black-owned businesses in town, and they listed them. And I was like, okay, I got to come to this more often, because they educated me in ways as the leader that I hadn't had time to educate myself. So always when I've had time with kids, they really help us. So I'm seeing that in the fabric in our district. And I'm just really proud of our leaders and our teachers who understand that our youth have so much wisdom as such young adults. Again, just with 3 other colleagues to have the same passion, some of this, a lot of the same structures. It's great to be here today.
Okay. I think we want to go to our participant questions. And we will start with one from, give me just a second to scroll up. This is from Jay Goldman, whom I believe is with AASA, the magazine. And this is, do we have concerns that really the unprecedented conditions of this crisis will drive out experienced superintendents from the profession? And let me add to that, what about your teaching staff? I mean, with vaccinations still so up in the air, do you expect a wave of retirements or teachers sort of saying, thanks, but no thanks, I think I'm going to leave right now? I will just throw this out to all 4 of you, and just unmute yourself and answer when there's a break.
So I'll just jump in. I think as leaders of the organization, we have to think about self-care. We have to think about how are we resilient in the toughest leadership of a lifetime is what I'm calling it. How do I sustain myself? Because if I can't, then my principals can't, and my teachers can't. So I think we should all be worried about all of those things. Superintendents leaving, teachers leaving, and it's on us to model that. I did not know how important it was to just say to people, do not read your email over winter break. Do not read it. And the permission from the top level of the organization to our principals that then goes to their teachers is really critical. Self-care right now, the hardest thing to do, but the most important thing we do, because if we don't stay, we start over in many cases. So it's something we should all be worried about and caring carefully for every one of our school communities.
Yeah, I would just agree with everything Chris just shared. This is we were remiss not to say this is a tough time. As we opened our doors the last week of August and had, students back and gave choice to parents in regards to how they wanted to return. And, the level of, candidly stress around that, because teachers are concerned. A lot of parents want their students back. It's just all over the board in regards to how people feel about the moment in time, this moment in time that we're in. And frankly, even myself, having personally experienced COVID over the break as I was in and out of school buildings and engaging with the public. We can't send our troops, so to speak, on the ground, all of us, without being on the ground ourselves. And we those are the risks. And so, we've really elevated the importance of, as we talk a lot about students' mental health and whole child development, and the social emotional supports for children. It's also become abundantly important that we do the same thing for our adults and really accelerate the pace at which we do that. We've done, we do something we called, our HR department's done a great job with something called Wellness Wednesday. And it's specifically for teachers, and whether it's cooking class, I've seen some cooking, I haven't participated yet in cooking class, but I've seen some cooking classes, I've seen some, exercises, I've just seen all kinds of things, because that whole person in this moment in time, and you started out with the first question, Stephen, but we're dealing with COVID, but we're also dealing with racial tension. We're dealing with government tension. It is a challenging time in public education, and so I think it's something that to Christy's point, we all have to be keenly aware of where we are and have a pulse on, and where our talent is in this moment.
Fantastic. I would like to thank Christy and Bryan and also Michelle. As Michelle said earlier, this is not only an engaging conversation, but it's a learning opportunity, and I'm able to gather notes from my colleagues, and I love it. This is so inspiring. And I would say succinctly, we know that we're going to have teachers that choose to move on out of the profession. Because of fear, because of self-care, because of not understanding the unknown. And it's our job as leaders to use this opportunity to recruit more diversity and encourage folks to restore and return. We have to remain hopeful. We have to remain inspiring. We have to, again, recruit teachers with the head and heart alignment and passion and purpose to understand that educating our youth is like the greatest job in the world. We have an authentic opportunity to shape the lives of our leaders that are going to, we're going to be sitting back seeking leadership from these young people. It's a beautiful thing. I think it feeds our democracy. We have to continue to uplift teaching as a profession of valor and of great importance. So as teachers and educators make choices based on safety, based on fear of the unknown, based on how long this pandemic will last, we still have to look at the other side of the coin in regards to really pumping up our recruitment, really looking to address the diversity of our professionals who are in front of our kids, and also encouraging, as we recruit and retain our staff, really focusing on that restoration piece, that restoration of health, that resonant leadership piece, and also looking to reclaim teachers who choose to leave the profession. Just don't let them go. Let's find out what's going on and reclaim them back into this magnificent profession, because it's the best job on the planet. I'll tell you, leading kids and being able to live through their eyes vicariously, knowing that, you know what, kid, you're going to be the one driving us in the future. I can't wait to sit back and watch you grow.
Well, I'm going to just jump right in there, Khalid. I actually worry when my kids were driving, so I'm hoping it's going to be a good ride. I will say that to follow on to that, I believe that education is the most important profession in the world because every other profession has to go through K-12 education, right? Like we're it. If you, whatever you want to be, you got to come through K-12 education. So the other thing I want to share is that it's so important to remember at this time that one of the strengths of being part of an organization like AASA is that with our voice comes advocacy. And one of the things we can do to circumvent losing quality staff at every role in the district is to strongly advocate for a supported, resourced testing and tracing program to safely open and keep our schools open. And I think that there have been a lot of patchwork ideas that all of us have tried and our colleagues have tried in different states or different counties within states. And I think if we can advocate for an approach that is systemically resourced to support testing and tracing, it will enable us, with the addition of the vaccines that are coming, to be able to provide a safe and healthy school reopening for students and our staff. And I think as we await that time and plan for that time, having a ramp to help build that with our testing and tracing is going to be really thoughtful. There's been such an erosion of trust, I think, over the last number of months on a variety of topics. And it's time for us to rebuild that, not just with words, but with actions that our staff will take to hang in there with us. I know we've had a tougher time behind us than we do ahead of us. And we just have to come together and utilize the voice of advocacy, I think, for health and safety so that we don't lose staff.
I'm really glad that you all mentioned that you're taking notes. Here are mine. Oh, you can't really see it, but yes, I have a whole notebook here that I've been marking up while you've been speaking. There are two more questions that I would like to get to that have come in from panelists, but we're starting to reach a little bit near the end of our time. So we're going to make these sort of speed roundy. So, minute or less with your responses, because I think they're both very important questions. The first is Richard Long, who's with the Learning First Alliance, and it's very similar to a question that, let me see here, that Deborah Carr, the immediate past president of AASA, asked, and this is, what do you need to do to make learning recovery effective? What are the plans for the following year to address those students who have particularly suffered academically as a result of the pandemic? Clearly at the national level, we've been hearing a lot of discussion about, is there a way we can scale up tutoring programs, for example, which we know have strong research behind them. But in a minute or less, tell us how you guys are thinking through this question.
So saving every dollar to extend learning, to extend tutoring, our title dollars. I mean, we have to spend in different ways, and then huge advocacy at the state level to get additional resources. We're calling it fifth quarter, we're calling it extended learning, but anything we can do to get kids more learning time in small groups, we've got to do it. And to remember that the whole system, when we start, is going to have experienced some learning loss. So how do we deal with that on top of social emotional learning?
I agree with what Christy said, and I know Bryan and Khalid are going to come up with some fabulous strategies, the mentoring, the personalized approach, the connecting with families and relationships. But I want to read a short quote from Teresa Thayer Snyder that I shared with our staff yesterday. Resist the pressure from whatever powers that be who are in a hurry to fix kids and make up for the lost time. The time was not lost. It was invested in surviving a historic period of time in their lives and in our lives. The children do not need to be fixed. They are not broken. They need to be heard. They need to be given as many tools as we can to provide to nurture resilience and help them adjust to a post-pandemic world.
Powerful, powerful. I would say succinctly, with change, there's loss, but with loss, there's opportunity, great opportunities. We have to continue to advocate, especially at the legislative level, to be able to have sustainable funding, to be able to support students in this learning phenomenon. I hate to use the word loss because that's thinking of this with a deficit mindset. Looking forward, not only is this an opportunity to engage students around strong pedagogy, teaching and instruction, but it's also a way to further strengthen our culturally responsive teaching practices. Because I think that ultimately, a lack of loss or learning and a lack of attention to curriculum responsive teaching, the loss will be perpetuated over years. So I'm looking at this as an opportunity to not only feed our students' souls with good academia, but also feed their bodies and their souls with good culturally responsive teaching practices, which will be sustainable. Whereas to further inform our practice as we move forward from years on.
The only thing I'd add, I think we've got to zero in on the standards that matter the most, and really double down on what matters most from a curriculum standpoint. One of the greatest things that's happened during this pandemic is that parents have been engaged. They've almost been forced to be engaged. So we've got to figure out how to keep them there. And that's incumbent upon us to figure out how to keep them there. I think Chris or somebody said earlier, as we talk about parent-teacher conferences, they look different. And I think we have to take advantage of that. I think we have to continue to support teachers. So our focus will be on continuing to professionally develop and support our teachers, because again, everybody was pushed off the diving board. We've got to come back and make sure they really understand Canvas, and they really understand how to leverage our single sign-on ClassLink, and really understand our curriculum resource. We've got to really make sure that we go deeper in support of our teachers so that they can really be masters of the supports we provide.
Okay, so this next will be our last question, and after that, Dan will wrap things up for us. This one comes from Tanya Bozeman, the superintendent, and her question is, how are you dealing with the issue of students who are working during the school day? Are you applying traditional truancy procedures to them? And I think this is a great question. We know, especially at the high school level, more students are working as families struggle economically. I think this is a really difficult challenge. I think this is a really great question. So, and it's a tough question. So I will stop talking, let you guys all go, and Dan will pick up after me.
All right. So I think one of the things we recognized earlier, and honestly, Stephen, we actually have younger than high school children taking on responsibilities they've never had before in multi-generational homes, for example, taking care of older relatives who are ill, and working. I mean, there's all manner of challenges. What I would say is we are not working within traditional truancy guidelines. We recognize that many of those policies were written for a time that we're not in. And we have to recognize that in a pandemic, we may need to be flexible and nimble. So we've added asynchronous or flex time instructional modules and flex time connections. So that's been our approach to both synchronous and asynchronous. So we have recorded lessons students can connect to when they get off work, or if they have to do a late shift or work alternate hours. And it's another thing that I hope that we carry forward with us when we return to those schools of the future.
I would say that in the Reading School District, we came upon or embarked upon these challenges through the truancy process, and by engaging with students and asking the question of why are you missing school, and work was one of the prominent issues. Therefore, that helped us to inform our practice and our policies, where we created environments where students, similar to what Michelle has stated, credit recovery centers where students are able to work on their high school diploma as well as work out in the field. the fields, the fields of interest for them. Secondly, partnering with our Career and Technology Center, whereas these students are on half-day schedules and they are out into the workforce, for the remainder of the day. Some of them are on an AM schedule and some of them are on a PM schedule. And more specific, it really pushed us and it pushed me as a leader to take a look at different ways to educate students. All students don't fit into one big box. They don't fit into our huge comprehensive high school, which has close to 6,000 students. So putting together plans, implementing instructional areas where we have distance learning, where students can come in on flexible schedules and still be able to get out and continue their work in the workforce. So, it's just forcing us to move a little more, make us move faster. It's about empowerment, efficiency, and effectiveness. And this sits right in that efficiency component to push the system to continually put programs together to address the needs of our students.
And I agree with Michelle and Khalid. This is a moment to reimagine what we do from, I think, a high school, in particular, when I think about secondary high school offering standpoint. And for many students and for many schools, it will never go back. It will never look the same, and it doesn't need to look the same. And so I think it's an opportunity. Michelle, I stole your quote that we don't want the schools of, we want the schools of tomorrow or the future. I forget exactly how you said, I wrote it down. We don't want the schools that we've had, right? And so I think we've got an opportunity right now to really evaluate what it is we're doing. The only other thing I'll add, our school leaders have done a great job in our system of really trying to make sure that, and obviously I know first semester really unique in that we were on campus, but really trying to make sure that they targeted those students that may not have been logging on and progressing in the way that they needed to, and literally trying to pull them into school. I was at the closest school to our district office, and talking to that secondary leader, he said he called the job because he knew the student was going to work every day. He called the manager and said, "Hey, the student's showing up, great, but they're not logging in." And so our school leaders have done a really quality job of trying to track down students. But again, it's a moment to reimagine how we serve, I think, our secondary school students.
Yeah, and I would just agree with all of you. I think we used to think of taking attendance as more of that punitive measure. And we have learned so much about the lives of our students. We know 100% we can't be punitive, and attendance is only taken to understand what the challenges are. So, and that whole ability to do synchronous and asynchronous, and if you at least log into a asynchronous, that counts. I think those are all attendance practices that are going to have to be in the future. And again, we just can't miss this moment in time to be better on the other side. The issues that our students were facing in homes didn't mostly start with the pandemic. There were kids that needed to work before the pandemic that worked at night and then didn't get up for school the next day, right? And then we penalized them for that. So anyway, it's been just a really great chance for us to understand the challenges of our students and families.
Well, I want to thank the four of you and thank you, Steve, for moderating this discussion. But I want to thank the four of you for the passion, the commitment, and the faith that you've shown in your children that they will lead us into a better world, because you are empowering them and you're giving them the opportunity to learn, to lead, to have a voice at the table. I am so proud of the four of you. Tune in on February 18th to find out which of these fabulous four will become the National Superintendent of the Year. From my perspective, the four of them already are. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, everybody.